Hey there, and welcome back to the membership. Okay, this month we are talking about becoming a well-rounded handler. And a well-rounded handler isn't just good under pressure or super well trained, has all the right handling skills in the ring, but a well-rounded handler is also emotionally agile, mentally intentional, and they show up with clarity and confidence for their dogs. So we're going to explore 4 core concepts. I think that there's way more than 4, by the way. Like we could do a year basically on being a well-rounded handler, because all of the skills that we teach every month, every week really are building to that point. But under the umbrella of well-rounded handler, I decided to chip off 4 things, and we are going to start with energy. So energy isn't a new concept. I think last year, or maybe even the year before, I was pretty obsessed with energy. And I'm still obsessed with it. I just don't talk about it as much. But it has made me just really aware of my energy and the energy I bring to my dog, whether I am training or competing or honestly even going for like a morning walk. I mean, there's nothing like going for a morning walk when you just wake up crabby and you're like yelling at your dogs for every stupid leaf they put in their mouth or whatever, versus the energy that you have when you go for a walk and you just got really good news before you headed out the door. And so you're all sunshine and rainbows, and those dogs pick up the leaf and you're like, it's just roughage. It's fine. And, they're just unicorns everywhere you go, everywhere you look, right? So the energy, that seems like mood, but really it's an energy. It's the energy that we bring. And the good news is we can influence, somewhat control, but certainly be very, very aware of how we show up. Okay. And we can even choose to not show up if our energy or our mood is so off that we just think it would be detrimental to, say, training for that afternoon, right? If you get really bad news on your way out the door and it makes you super, super crabby, or maybe you're just hangry, it might not be the best time to teach a new skill, right? Because a new skill is going to take patience and you're going to make a lot of mistakes and you're going to have to be okay with that, right? Okay, so we want to make sure that we are being very conscious about how we show up, okay, or the energy we bring to the ring. And it doesn't just mean showing up on time, obviously. It means showing up with our mindset, our presence, and our ability to take a breath and own the space that we're in, right? We want to make sure that we are in the right frame of mind. I'm kind of using a lot of phrases interchangeably in case one clicks more than another for you. But we want to make sure that we're being a leader. We're setting the tone, right? Our dogs, if you think about pack mentality, and you think about even the pack in your own household, right? The pack is not necessarily determined by, that old adage, which is actually since been disproven, of alpha dog, right? And the alpha dog being like, the meanest, the strongest, the most growly, kind of a thing, right? My pack once was very much led by a dog that was the quietest, kind of the most unassuming. But the thing is wherever we went, like if we went to someone else's house and they had 3 dogs, those 3 dogs would step behind her, if you will, right? And she wasn't, like I said, she wasn't growly. She didn't have some big presence or whatever, but she had the best energy. She just did. And so the dogs really responded to that, right? The people really responded to that. She just was that kind of a dog. So really, that's the kind of human we want to be, right? We want to be the kind of human where we just have good energy, where people just respond to us well, that we have like intention, steadiness, I think is a great word for this. Just like, I think dogs like predictability, right? So for us to be that like steady energy, that steady handler is really important for our dogs. And we want to walk into the ring with clarity. We talked last month about like clarity versus clarity versus chaos. And we definitely do not want to walk into the ring with chaos. We want to be that calm, steady, predictable, centered person. And when we show up as a centered, steady person, our dogs show up that way too, because they respect us as a leader and they want to emulate the leader. Like in a pack mentality, right? They're going to be successful if they emulate the leader. And so again, the leader, us, we don't have to be like alpha and like, making our dogs submit to us and all of that, sort of very outdated thinking. We do that really successfully with our energy and with our calm leadership and how we show up. Okay. It doesn't mean perfection. We're not going to be good at this all the time. All right. But we want to be able to, again, call on this steadiness and have a very clear picture in our heads of who we want to show up as. Because when the adrenaline of a trial hits or there is chaos in our environment, we need to know what it is that we want to feel. Because interestingly enough, how we feel is more motivating than having, like, say, certain tangible goals, right? It's a thing I've talked about in the context of goal setting, but, studies show, right, that we want things because we want them emotionally and how they will make us feel. We say we want a new car because it has all the bells and whistles, but really we want a new car because it makes us feel safe. It makes us feel like we can take our dogs to a trial and be safe and secure in that vehicle, right? Feelings. So feelings really matter. And this concept of that I've used the phrase like chasing feelings, I don't really mean chasing necessarily, but like holding that feeling out and going after that feeling is really powerful, but B, really motivating, because we want to feel steady, reliable, calm, confident, have presence. And so sometimes it's easier to write that as a goal and have a feeling as a goal, especially when you're dealing with energy. But even as you're going to your local trial this weekend, maybe the theme of your trial this weekend is I want to feel steady. Okay. Like that is a worthy goal. That is like a process goal to applaud, right? Okay. So let's get into it. So when we are trialing, we know that our dog feels how we show up, right? If we're feeling anxious, if we're feeling stressed, if we're feeling nervous, obviously, the old adage, it runs down the leash. It also runs back up the leash, I think. But our dogs definitely feel what we bring. And they know when we're lying, okay? So the fake it till you make it works up until a point, because our dogs will sort of see through it, which is why I'm always saying, like, I want you to believe the next most believable thing, right? The next better thought. Because if we're lying, if we're choosing some outrageous thoughts, it's not authentic, and our dogs will figure it out, right? They're reading our micro movements, our breathing, our energy. They know when we're frantic or hesitant or rushing or just maybe even completely checked out, So we want to learn how to regulate our own nervous system as a part of training, handling, working our dogs, and competing with our dogs, right? So we want to figure that out, because the more we can regulate our own nervous system, the more we can influence our dog's nervous system. And then happily, we start to influence everybody around us, because people want to be in our orbit, if you will, right? Because we're the calm ones, we're the regulated ones, we're the ones that are steady and predictable and maybe positive or joyful or always clapping for others or whatever it is that we want our energy to give off, okay? So, and that, well-rounded handlers or elite handlers or those people you really envy because you watch them and they're like, that phrase, nerves of steel, which is kind of a crazy phrase to dissect rather. But it is, when you watch someone, what you're seeing is that levelness, right? They're not up and down. They're not erratic. They're not one person 1 minute and another person the next minute. They're just steady. Okay. So they're not letting these other factors, these external factors, get to them. Okay. So we want to have intentional energy. That's what we're going for. That it's a almost like a curated energy, right? And so we want that over obviously random. Random energy would be highly influenced by our surroundings. We talked about a lot about that last month. But intentional energy is something that we get to decide how we want to show up. Okay. So probably last month you figured out like what your kind of default energy is, and maybe you weren't using energy, right? You were figuring out like, oh, when am I distracted? When am I chaotic? When am I getting pulled away or sucked into, some other environment that I don't want to be in? So this month we're going to take that. So everything we learned from last month and layer in this energy piece. Okay. Because we don't need our default energies, like say it's anxious or say, or nervous or say it's angry, right? Maybe you're really short-tempered when you're nervous, or maybe you're really quiet, when you're in, competitive environments or something like that. Like, you're going to have to figure that out. I always say start with awareness, but you're going to have to figure out what your default is, so that you can figure out, well, like, is this default good, or are there pieces of my default energy that are good that I want to keep, or do I really need to take a different tact? Okay. So your job then is to figure out like, what energy are you currently bringing? And do this for like trialing versus competition, because the energies are probably very different. And I think this is where people are like, oh, I wish I could run my dog in trials like I do when I'm practicing. Well, maybe part of the clue for that, or one of the factors in doing that, has to do with your energy. What's your energy when you practice versus your energy when you're at a trial? For a lot of people and most clients I coach, like the energy is very different, right? They're chill, they're relaxed. Maybe even they're going to a group class where it's like, it's social hour with a few runs of agility thrown in there, and so they're like super chill, sometimes not even really paying attention, they're so chill, versus when you get to a competition, now you're like hyper focused and you're like, fretting about the ring order and like when you run and like all this kind of stuff, and you're a completely different person. Well, of course your dog notices that, right? So that's the first thing, is that I want you to notice what energy you're currently bringing to all the different places. Backyard training, class training, competition, just notice it. Bonus points, obviously, for, journaling it out. Okay. And then I want you to ask, is that energy at each of those places what your dog needs from you? Right? Big question. Does your dog need you to be calm and chill and almost checked out at class, right? Do they need you to be hectic or kind of cranky in the backyard? Do they need you to be, frenetic and nervous in a competition, right? Okay, obviously I'm being a little silly. The answer is no to all of those things. So, or where are you being great? Where are you being like the right energy? Where are you being the supportive, connected, steady handler that you feel like your dog needs? And if your dog needs a little more energy from you, like where are you being that like energetic and excited and happy and responsive, right? It's not all steady doesn't mean boring, right? I mean, some of my dogs really want me to be up and happy and silly, and some of mine would rather I say as few syllables as possible, right? So we have to learn that, and we have to figure out like, am I bringing what my dog needs from me? And if not, what do I need to do to shift that? And in what environments, do we match better, or are we a disconnect? Do we match up really well in training, but I'm not delivering what I need to support my dog in the ring, right? You got to kind of figure all of that out. So we want to learn how to modulate our energy based on not only environment, but what our dog needs, because our dogs also might be more relaxed training in the backyard or in a group class. But then when we get to competition, the adrenaline gets to them also. So maybe they need a calmer version of us to help them be calm as well, for instance, right? Okay. So before your next run, and your next run could be anywhere, like I said, training, competition, whatever, I want you to take 30 seconds. And it's literally just 30 seconds. So please don't tell me you don't have time, okay? Because you're lying if you say that to me, okay? I just want you to run real quick through these questions. And it would be amazing if this worked into your rituals going forward, by the way. And the questions are just like check-in questions. I just want you to check in with yourself. What energy am I carrying right now? Is my energy helpful to my dog? What would it look like to bring something else, a steadiness or a calmness or even a more exciting, depending what your dog needs? And most importantly, this last one, what do I need to believe about myself before I step to the line? Because that last one can really get us in trouble and wrapped around the axle, because sometimes we have these limiting beliefs that are getting in the way, and we're stressing about the course and we're thinking, oh my God, I'm never going to get there. I'm never going to be able to do this, or my dog's not going to work in this environment. It's too distracting, All of these sort of built-in excuses that we're laying out before we've even walked in the ring. And so sometimes we need to shift our belief in ourselves before we step to the line. Okay, that could really be influencing our energy. And I don't want you, nor do I expect you, to be able to solve it in 30 seconds, right? But you might uncover it and you might journal about it later. But like if I'm running through this in 30 seconds, what energy am I carrying right now? And the answer is like, I'm like a combination of like a little nervous and a little excited. And if I look at my dog, is that helpful to my dog? No, I can tell they're disconnecting. They're sniffing. They're like, ooh, what's over there? Because whatever's happening with my handler, I'm not interested in, right? And so like, okay, good to know. I need to think steady thoughts, right? I need to think calm thoughts. I need to take some breaths. I need to feel my feet in my shoes. Okay, good. Now, what do I need to believe about myself when I step into the line? And it might just be as simple as, I'm a calm leader, or I'm setting the tone for us. It doesn't have to be complicated, and I don't need you to repeat it 10 times. I just need you to develop this awareness and preferably turn this into a ritual, so that part of your ritual becomes checking in with your energy before you run. And you can do this on your way to the crate, right? On your way to go get the dog. This doesn't have to interrupt or change any of the other things that you got going between crate to gate. But it is a really good habit to get into, to check in on the energy that you are showing up with today and how you want that to be different. Okay? So I want to remind you, this isn't about faking anything. I don't need you to fake your confidence. I don't need you to like blow sunshine up your own leggings, right? But it is about becoming someone your dog can count on, right? And I often say to clients when I'm coaching them, the change is hard when it's just changing for ourselves, but the change becomes a lot more motivating when we're changing for our dogs, because I think all of us would do absolutely anything for our dogs, right? So we want to think about, we're becoming someone our dog can count on. We're becoming the energy our dogs can count on. Okay. This is obviously for things when they're going well, but also for when they're not going so well, because a good leader, a good pack leader shows up consistently, right? So we're not trying to be loud. We're not trying to be showy. We're trying to be grounded, clear, calm, steady, and that predictable leadership presence for our dogs. Right? And the more we practice it, of course, the more our dogs will rise to meet us there, because we'll become somebody they want to hang around, right? One of the things that always cracks me up, and I should know it, but it never ceases to amaze me, is whenever I am meditating somewhere my dogs can get to me, and I say that because I've had to move, they always come sit by me, sit on me, crawl in my lap, try to get all comfy with me. And I'm sitting I could be sitting in the same place I'm always sitting, but all of a sudden I've just decided sort of mentally that my energy is getting to a better place. And so they're like, yeah, we want to be around that. That's the person we want to be around. So I'm getting sort of instant feedback. I say I've had to move because the crawling in my lap when you have Bernese Mountain Dogs is not so conducive to focused meditation. But I do appreciate the immediate feedback that my dogs give me. Okay. All right. So that's it for energy this week. Next week, we are going to talk about managing our expectations, which I know is a big thing for all of us, including yours truly. So have a good week.